What's up, YouTube? It's Anthony Castillo with you guys. So this one right here is going to be focused on imperfect theory. I don't know if you guys can see that right here. So what does that mean? Well, most of you already kind of understand what that means, right? Being imperfect. And this is going to be very, very crucial as it comes to understanding how we have dialogue with people, the patterns of receiving and transmitting messages, and even when we're speaking uh, with devices and computers, tablets, any other mode of technology out there that we can think of. Well, the reason why I wanted to focus on this imperfect theory is because I remember purchasing an audio in my audiobooks one time about the art of dealing with people, right? So when we think of the title of that, right, never judge a book by its cover, but it was an audio. So we recognize that the art of dealing with people often requires a certain type of science. I'm gonna be honest, that even science in itself is a form of art, right? We think about dance. Dance is a form of communication. Dance is a form of relating with someone when you sense their emotional state, or they're evoking a type of emotional um, aspect of themselves. Well, the reason why I say imperfect theory is because I recognize even in the patterns of my channels and my videos and the types of implementations I tend to do with what I'm trying to come up, just develop, is that I realize that I'm not going to be a perfect person, right? No one is. Hopefully, no one is. And if those that believe they are, then that's a whole different rabbit hole. But anyways, think about that imperfect theory. I know in my previous videos I talked about how I don't really like the word theory. Honestly, I really don't. If I'm being, if I'm always using it, I do catch myself sometimes feeling like I have to use the word theory in order to apply it as like some kind of like hindsight or some kind of like future predictions, right? Even economists, if you hear it on TV or anywhere like that, on a video, they do talk about future predictions or economy and stuff like that. Well, anyways, the reason why I say imperfect theory is because let's kind of believe that spirituality is about being imperfect, right? Recognizing that we are humans, recognizing that we are not going to always make, the right set of, the right kind of skills at the right time, not all the time. However, there are some limitations, I'd say, just because if you are making the same mistake over and over, then that's a whole, not even a rabbit hole, it's more like a different, you gotta figure out. But just think about that, right? Imperfect theory and how that can apply to spirituality. Well, spiritually, we're gonna realize that we're not gonna be perfect. We're gonna realize that many of us, if you, in the context, if you are a Buddhist or if you're a person that's believes in Hinduism or Christianity, Catholicism, most places they will look at this word called sin. And, we're not perfect. None of us, none of us. And that word is often used, right? If you listen to my other talk, hopefully you know what I'm talking about there. But anyways, I just wanted to kind of just develop this type of simpleness here, because when we think about how we apply imperfection, we're going to take notice that we are going to be fine. Now if someone runs off your imperfections, and someone runs off or derives specifically on pointing out your imperfections, then that's a whole nother thing that you probably have to deal with yourself and also deal with that, right? Because if a person's continuously always pointing out the imperfect part and not necessarily pointing out the good part of you, then that's a host of problems, right? That can be applied in various ways. If you're working in a job or if you're a boss or something like that. Now, I'm not saying for you to go tell a person, hey, you got issues. I'll be honest. I've had experiences where when I was working with students, that they would ask me like, how did you do it? Like, how did you go to school? And they were working on their school stuff, right? They were wanting to figure out what they wanted to do with their school, whether they want to continue to, continue their education. And as I was just telling them, like, hey, just put your mind to it. Well, come to find out, manager found out that I was speaking about education, and she didn't like that. Now, just let yourself sink in for a little bit. So she did not appreciate me speaking about education because, I don't know, it may have triggered something in her life that felt like she didn't accomplish enough in her life or something like that. But when I think about that experience, and I remember how just horrible it was to have been through that kind of scenario where someone didn't disliked the fact that I spoke about education, because I was asked about it, right? It wasn't like, oh, hey, look at me, I got this, and I got, no, no, no. It was more like I was asked about it, I was prompted, and I responded respectfully. Now, I wasn't forcing anyone to do something. I was just being myself. Someone asked me, and I did it. Unfortunately, there's a difference between understanding, you know, workplace or organizational viewpoints versus real life. So, just wanted to leave you with that. Remember, imperfect theory is one of those things that we got to take notice that it's there and just find new ways to be able to recognize that if we are being imperfect, that we can be okay. We can re-evaluate ourselves and say, we're not perfect. We're not going to always get it right. But if we just stay with our ways of doing things and try to change it up a bit, then we'll be fine, right? We'll be fine. But anyways, guys, remember to subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one.